Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, March 14th. Beware the Ides of March. They're coming sooner than you know. And I'm pleased to welcome in my amigos, Nick Welsh of the Santa Barbara Independent, Josh Molina of, too many platforms to even mention. Most importantly, his podcast, Santa Barbara Talks, and we're awaiting the imminent arrival of Margot Lovely and Callie Fausey, knock on wood. But we want to talk about a couple of kind of epic public meetings in Santa Barbara this week, starting with last night, Thursday night, at Santa Barbara, no, I guess La Cumbre Junior High, Nick, about Sable oil. There have been some big developments this week. Suddenly, the state is kind of woken up and is interested in whether or not that pipeline gets reopened.
Yeah, it was at the auditorium at the Sumba Junior High School over on Modoc Road. And I won't say every seat was taken, but most of them, I'd say 350, 400 people there. All the enviros who wanted to stop Sable from restarting were there in red shirts. And then you had the Sable guys. And I'm sure there must have been a Sable woman or two, but mostly guys, and they were wearing their Sable hats. And, I would say maybe a third of them, a quarter of them were from Sable, and the rest were the enviros. And the occasion was this was the first, last, and only sort of public venting. Uh, it wasn't a hearing, it was a meeting, which is a key legal distinction. And it was 8 state agencies. So you had Wade Crowfoot, who is the secretary of the Natural Resources Department. So he was there, which was a pretty big lift. You have head of the Public Parks Department. You have Fish and Wildlife there. You have OSPR, which is one of those great acronyms, Oil Prevention Response Agency.
And
All these different.
this is all organized by our state lawmakers.
So yeah, this was a Monique Limon, a state senator, and Greg Hart, our assembly member. Um, they all sort of went to bat for us to have some sort of public vent session or sharing of information.
Because there's
Because,
been no public hearing at all on
well,
reopening.
we've had that's
Well, except for that
90%.
creepy
The
thing at
only
the
thing,
court.
the only say over Sable that the county of Santa Barbara has is whether or not it can transfer the title and ownership from
Right, with the
Exxon to Sable. And there
talked
was a
about
meeting a
last.
couple of weeks ago. It was a 2-2 tie. Sable claims it won. The environment claimed they won. The county doesn't want to know who won because the longer it's undetermined, the better off they like it. And
But this is new. Now you have 8 state agencies all of a sudden saying, well, maybe we have some jurisdiction here after all.
well, they have everybody has a limited bite at the apple. The state fire marshal has the biggest bite of the apple, but they all have different overlap, and nobody has said we need an environmental impact statement or report or what level of environmental analysis they think is required or necessary or useful for restarting a plant that's been shut down for 10 years and whose corrosion, the pipeline, its propensity for corrosion and spills, you know, how well do we understand that? And what are the consequences and how much money do they have in the banks if things go wrong? All of those kinds of questions. So all these agencies got up and it was sort of show and tell civics lesson that, oh, here we go. This is what our oversight is, and this is where we are with Sable. And there are a number of agencies like the Coastal Commission, a guy named Cassidy Schuppel said, you know what, we issued them a cease and desist order in November, and they basically have been flipping us off ever since. They've been continuing to work. This has never happened in the history of the Coastal Commission where somebody has defied a cease and desist order. So that was kind of an interesting bit of information. But so it was going on like this. And then kind of the big surprise event was when the Environmental Defense Center was invited to get up and speak, and Linda Kropp from the EDC brought with her Julia Louis-Dreyfus, famous actor of Seinfeld and more recently Veep. And Julia has really kind of joined into the fight with full force. And she was a five hand grenade explosion up at the podium. I mean, she went off on Sable, and she was just going on and on about how they are lawbreakers and they are defying, cease and desist orders, and they can't be trusted. And Sable had no idea that this was coming. Sable had no idea that EDC would have an opportunity, and they were pissed. And they all stood up en masse and walked out, which is so it was a very dramatic moment. I mean, it really was a major. So if you're Sable, you have reason to be upset. You definitely got sucker punched, but it is sort of like in the rules of engagement, when you show up at a knife fight, you better bring a gun, and they didn't show up with a knife. And I think they are. I mean, they feel that the whole thing was a bad
So
thing.
did anything change?
I think what changed is this. I think that this is going to get on the governor's radar a lot more than it has. I mean, you had a guy, Grant Mack from the governor's office, who
The
was
governor's gone full MAGA.
huh?
The governor's gone full MAGA with his
Well, he has sort of wanted to either stay away from it or to the extent he put any thumb on the scale has been on Sable's behalf.
yeah.
But, I mean, the real question is, where is the attorney general if this oil company is defying cease and desist orders?
Thumbing their nose at the state. Yeah.
Thumbing their nose at the state. That was the point that, Julia Louis-Dreyfus hammered home. A lot of people hammered home. And I think that this is definitely a big alarm clock for Bonta. It's a big alarm clock for a lot of state agencies. Maybe it's just window dressing. So at the end of the day, people can say, well, we did the best we could. But I think it's going to move the needle a lot more than that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And Monique, I think her quiet effectiveness, getting all these agencies to show up in Santa Barbara on a Thursday night. I mean, first
You have 8 state agencies showing up at a junior high school in Santa Barbara on a Thursday night. Never happened before. You've never had the Coastal Commission blown off with a cease and desist order in the history of an agency that started in 1972. And this is the first time a fire marshal has ever issued a waiver to an oil company for corrosion issues. So there's a whole lot of firsts going on here.
Yeah. And I think you're right about Bonta being the key here because Gavin, and whatever Gavin's doing, I mean, he's running for 2028, but he's not doing a very good job. And he's just sort of abdicated the role of standing up to Trump. And Bonta has stepped into the breach there. He's got, I don't know,
how many lawsuits has he filed?
Going now, and it it just seems like Sable figures with this sort of quiet settlement they reach with the county and Trump, between them they'll be fine. But I think if Bonta files suit, that'll be a big deal. All right, interesting. So this story that keeps on giving, Sable Oil. All right, Josh, you're getting much too old to be covering public meetings at 2 o'clock in the morning, but that's in fact what you were doing this week at the at Santa Barbara Unified School District, and a lot of drama out of what would ordinarily be sort of a mundane process move. What happened?
Well, the star of this meeting was Celeste Caffrey, who's the newest school board member. You rarely see board members challenge the administration or Superintendent Hilda Maldonado. In fact, Maldonado's really benefited from a board that basically she is managed rather than them managing her. So they were voting on sending layoff notices to teachers. This is an annual thing that they do. They have to do it by March 15th. And then once the state budget comes out and they know how much money they're going to actually have, they usually rescind many of the
So
notices.
it's because we have budget issues, we may have to reduce the force, and therefore we have to send you this as a
It's
formality.
an annual thing because enrollment fluctuates, so they don't actually know how many teachers they're going to need until later. So they over send layoff notices and then pull some of them back. That part is routine. This year it's a little worse because of the state budget situation, because of the national situation in terms of whether there will be cuts that trickle down to the school district, as well as that contract that they paid the teachers last year. So there's less money. And so what happened was arts, music, theater teachers, kids who said that their lives have been saved by learning instruments in the public school system, by singing, by performing, they showed up at this meeting. The meeting lasted 8 hours. It went until 2. Well, I left at 2:30. They actually had an item after that where they were sending layoff notices to classified employees. That was pretty quick. This part of the meeting went 8 hours and it was ridiculous. At 2 in the morning, Jerry, like
And
I just
most
want
of
to
that
sleep.
was most of that that was public comment.
There was about 3 hours of public comment because there were about 85 speakers, and it was a huge deal. And I got to say, Celeste Caffrey, she
What time do you
actually,
usually go to bed, Josh?
well, I usually fall asleep in my chair about 10 and then, wake up at 1 and stumble into bed. But so Celeste Caffrey, she actually said, hey, we're not going to cut arts teachers, music teachers, theater teachers. Our enrollment has dropped 15%, she said, since COVID. Next, let's lay off administration, management, district management,
Oh, Elder must have loved
site
that.
management. She actually suggested this. Nobody would ever suggest this. So
There's
it is,
Callie. Welcome
there's
in,
Callie.
Callie Fausey. Hi, Callie.
So it was stunning.
Callie's actually just woken up from the school board meeting.
She wrote her story in her sleep. Yeah. So it was stunning to watch her say, let's cut these other positions. She had data, she had statistic, she showed graphs like spending at the district has gone up like this, while enrollment has gone this way. She was the hero of the night and she got into it with Bill Banning. And, Callie can tell more of the story, but I mean, I was just blown away that Caffrey had the nerve, the courage to stand up to the district and say, no, we're not going to fire these teachers. Let's look at the management and let's do that instead. And, just that's music to the teacher's ears. Like they've never heard that anyone say that. So, she's potentially, a little bit of a political star born in that moment, going to 2:30 in the morning. It was amazing.
Yeah. Callie, we appreciate that you kept elbowing Josh to keep him awake throughout the night because we know that at your age you're more used to staying up. But I mean, just from reading your coverage and Josh's coverage, it seems to me like Celeste has kind of a point here. I mean, if enrollment is declined, what, 1,800 students or something like that, and management and administration costs are up 25%. What the F?
Yeah, what the F exactly? No, she definitely does have a point, I think. Some of the other board members like uh Gabe Escobedo made the point that maybe they shouldn't be taking these audited financials at, face value. Like there are other things that live inside the numbers or whatever. I can even begin to talk about it with any sense of authority because school budgeting and finance is way out of my wheelhouse. But yeah, I really do think she does have a point. And I think that this is something that the teachers have been talking about for, the past like 2 years. They've been chirping about this, about how management costs have increased, about how, Hilda Maldonado added an entire other position to her cabinet. And despite, enrollment going down. So I just think she's kind of becoming a kind of a voice for the teachers that maybe they didn't have on the board.
And what was Banning doing? He was being Mr. Institutionalist and saying, "Oh, we've got to support the superintendent here."
I don't think that anyone on the board was wrong. I don't think any of them were trying to be, disagreeable or anything like that. I think that they all do actually care about the teachers. I think that they don't want to be cutting these positions. None of them want to do this. But I think like Banning was sort of more like his demeanor kind of came off to me as like, let's just forget about like what other cuts we can do, and
He was, let's just
let's
stick with the
let's just
process.
get this done. Yeah. I mean he made a comment that was kind of, I don't know, seemed a little rude, honestly, about the public comment, going on for 3 hours.
He's even older than Josh, if you can imagine that. So he
But yeah,
really
at the same time, like we were there for a very long time. Um, and they were all tired by the end of it. And honestly, I don't envy any of them. And the fact that they all stayed up there and listened for that amount of time, I would commend them. We say like Celeste Caffrey really spoke out on behalf of the teachers, but like they're all doing, kind of a job that none of us would really want to do. I mean,
yeah, they
I
get
didn't want to be there until
such an
3 a.m.
Let
So
me ask, because here's the thing that really jumped out and bit me out of the butt was like, okay, this is a sort of pro forma event that happens every year. Okay, it doesn't really mean we're going to cut 85 teachers, and it's like here it is, it's springtime, we got to do this, blah blah blah. That you had 80, 85 people wanting to show up, and that they are so tightly clustered around arts and theater and music. That was really interesting and powerful. And what's going on there that's making that happen now when it hasn't happened before to this extent?
Well, I will say that the air of Superintendent Maldonado is still there. There's still a lack of trust. Any little thing that happens now is met with massive skepticism. They just don't trust her and they don't trust the district management. So there's a feeling of, we just rallied. We're going to keep the pressure on. They did not get the increase during salary negotiations they wanted. They're still angry. I will say this about Banning, Jerry. He's like the old guy in the newsroom who isn't looking at analytics, who still wants to like publish stories the old-fashioned way, and they hire the new guy to come in and they clean house, and that's Celeste Caffrey. And that reminds me a lot of somebody I used to work with too, Jerry, where it's like we got to do these things differently and actually, publish stories people want to read. And what Celeste was saying, we need to actually listen to all the teachers in the room. And Banning was just basically like, I've been doing this for 45 years, and this happens every year, and this is part of the process.
Oh, we've always done it this way.
And he
Yeah.
actually said this is not going to result in a loss of disappearance of teachers, and he minimized it. And it is so condescending to minimize it when you've got a 16-year-old in the front row who's got to be to school at 9 in the morning.
Okay,
That was his
guys,
problem.
when have you ever covered a meeting where the students stay as long as they did? And the students, I don't know if they were driving the train, but they were definitely co-pilots, it sounded like from reading the stories. That was what really struck me, was like the students are jumping in here in a way I haven't felt before.
Yeah.
I was hoping Callie would get me a slice of pizza. I hinted at it, but she didn't do it.
Who
So
brought the pizza?
there were like 20 pizzas there. I was so hungry, and
I felt really bad. I really wanted a slice too, but I felt bad taking
I didn't want to take it from them, but I
What
thought
was it? The SPJ Code of Ethics that was preventing you
that's the one I draw the line on, is the pizza. Yeah.
from doing that? All right, before we leave that, were either of you clocking Hilda's face throughout this? How was she reacting to it? Did she say anything?
She was she was
about the
pretty quiet during it.
bloated management?
I kind of, I took a few looks at her and she would just, she was just listening. She was kind of just observing. She would like nod and, make the, regular, like I'm listening, active listening faces. But
Yeah,
she
okay.
she really did. She was just like kind of respectfully listened. And when they brought up, taking out transportation, like she brought up like how much it would save the district. I don't know. She was kind of a passive
But
presence.
she didn't engage Celeste directly on Celeste's points.
No, I mean she was paying close attention, and Hilda Maldonado is way too smart to show her cards in that moment. She may be thinking, "Uh-oh, we've got a problem," and she's trying to figure out how she's going to counter that. But in a public meeting, she's just professional and trying to offer explanation and insight. But I would, if I were her, I'd be worried about Celeste Caffrey.
Yeah, I'll say. All right. A couple of things quickly. One, Callie, you've had a couple of really good pieces lately talking to federal workers who have lost their jobs in this Doge chainsaw thing that's going on in Washington. And and I think your paper in general has done a pretty good job of like, what's the impact of all this? Because we keep reading about, 100,000 employees here and 87 gazillion dollars. But talk a little bit about those two pieces that you did.
Mhm. Yeah, so the first one I did was I went to a protest at the Channel Islands Visitor Center that was organized in part by a recently fired Channel Islands biologist. And he was he had like tons of experience. He had like 500 dives under his belt, and he got his termination letter in February, along with like a ton of other, national park employees. So he organizes this protest. Hundreds of people came out with signs that said like protect our parks, and they talked about, like this was the 45th anniversary of the Channel Islands National Park. They talked about the consequences of what's going to happen with these sweeping cuts. I think it's like 1,700 national park service employees have been fired at this point because of Doge. And they talked about these consequences with like it's like everything from like dirty bathrooms to one of the retired supervisors told me that when one of the government shutdowns happened in the past, that people came out with axes and chopped down Joshua trees in Joshua Tree National Park for firewood. So the consequences of losing these really dedicated people who protect these parks they're going to be pretty bad. And that was kind of what the U.S. Forest Service employee I spoke to as well, Ben Vizachero, said about losing his job at the Forest Service. And I think the Forest Service is like, I think it's like up to like 34, at least 3,400 people have lost their jobs at the Forest Service as well. And he was a Forest Service biologist. He did, surveying for vulnerable wildlife species, like if they're going to be, creating like a fuel break somewhere in the park, which is when they, clear out brush to mitigate mitigate the impacts of future wildfires. He makes sure there are no sensitive species like a California spotted owl in that area. And a lot of biologists, a lot of Forest Service biologists have lost their jobs, and he was one of them. And, he just had the cool, rare opportunity to actually look Elon Musk in the face and say, like, what the fuck, man? So, yeah.
Yeah, that was if you haven't read Callie's story, go back and read it because that confrontation was really pretty interesting and
But
what
who gets to do that? That was pretty amazing.
really because what he was Salud's guest
Bananas.
at the
Panetta's.
non Panetta, Jimmy
Yeah.
Panetta. Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
All right. All right. Um and then Josh, you had a piece Saturday about the Women's March. I mean, that was pretty focused against Trump, or what was? what was your takeaway?
It was an odd event. The transgendered rally the week before was an amazing event. There was at least 500 people, diverse young people, people of all ages. It was incredible. This event is weird, and I think there's a little bit of behind the scenes stuff going on. Obviously, it's great. It's International Women's Day, and women are out, and everybody's out, and they're taking a stand. But it was like a non-political event. So no elected officials were invited to speak. This is by the Santa Barbara Women's March. Um,
This is my
Michael
section.
Lynch is in charge. And so a lot of people came out with their signs, but it was more of like an open mic kind of thing where people would just kind of talk. So you've got people from CalPERG, various organizations talking about their issues. And so I've talked to people, I've talked to elected officials. They don't get invited. And so it's fine if they don't want to invite and have that organized event, but there's a certain air that is lost when you don't have a formal program. And so they met at Delagar Plaza, a couple hundred people, and then they kind of marched downtown. So I think there's a little bit of behind the scenes conflict in terms of organization. I did cover the Elon Musk Tesla protests, which are happening on Saturday mornings. And it's a lot of the same people, some overlap, but those crowds are very impressive. Those crowds, there's a couple hundred people, and it's on the sidewalk, because they can't be on private property. And they're very upset. And I can't imagine if you're wanting to buy a Tesla, like there's no way you're turning into that parking lot because you're going to be met with just so much hell from people. So I did cover the Women's March. It was fine. It was not the most impressive Women's March that I've ever covered in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was having this conversation this morning. Hap and I were, and he used the word resistance, and I thought, resistance is kind of very 2017. It's more opposition, and there's so many issues, and not everyone who's against Trump agrees with everyone else about every issue, i.e., trans women in sports, for starters. It is oppositional more than resistance. I think just in terms of the language, and maybe that has something to do with it, or maybe there are specific issues where there are disagreements. Josh, I don't know.
Hmm.
All right, final thing. Well, no, let me ask Nick something. Your piece on the librarian, the our departed city librarian, who now is cost what, $1.6 million
It's
all?
probably more than that.
More than that.
Yeah, I think my math was very, very conservative. I mean, Jessica Caliente was hired about 10 years ago to be the city librarian, and she was very like, we're marching into the future, we're not holding on to the past. And she was definitely, you can't make an omelet without breaking a bunch of eggs style management. And there was a big exodus. A lot of people, the city says 24% turnover under her watch the last 7 years. I talked to people who work there, and they say 20 to 24 people left. Either way, I know some of them personally, and these are like super high achieving, dedicated, driven librarians. And when that happens, something is going on. The city investigated what they spent $688,000. They paid that to a San Francisco law firm to come in and investigate what's going on. It took them 8 months to figure out. So there's something going on at the library, and I don't think I've gotten remotely to the bottom of it, but it was enough for the city, to pay Jessica Caliente $500,000 to go away and drop any threat of a
How
lawsuit.
much? How much did they pay?
500,000. So they pay her 500 grand. She gets paid a full year's salary, which, I've heard various numbers, but 250 to 300 with bells and whistle, plus, the cost of the investigation. Plus, for the past year, you've had to bring somebody else, a high-ranking administrator, to run the library. So it's been a a shit show, as they say.
And we don't, and all, in the end, nothing is made public about why this happened or anything. Save your
Not
room.
really.
Yeah,
Not really.
nice, nice.
Yeah, I mean you can talk to people and they will tell you what's going on, but the city will say nothing, and they signed a no disparagement clause. So I will say though, to add on, that far more people left under Superintendent Maldonado over the last several years. I would say twice as many. So it's definitely a problem. When you
But
have these leaders.
she doesn't have a supervisor.
Exactly.
The school board. So,
Right.
which is, we talked about this morning. All right. And then, Josh, real quick on the renovictions. They had another fight about it this week. The council did, but what did anything change, or where does that stand?
No, Randy Rouse, Eric Friedman, and Mike Jordan are increasingly coming across as disconnected from, the mood of the community, as well as the majority on the board. The city wants to cap the amount that a landlord can raise the rent after they renovate a building. So they evict, renovate, and then they just move it up to market. And the city's saying, wait a minute, those people who were kicked out, they should be allowed to come back, and they should have the first right to return, and at no more than 10% of a rent increase. And the property owners are saying that's insane. Why would we spend millions of dollars and not be able to make back our loan, our investment, if we can only raise it 10%? So that's sort of the issue. And then we've had some high profile apartment projects with evictions that are going on, that are in court. And so that is amplifying this. But the point is, there's 4 votes, and those 4 votes are not going to change. Megan, Wendy, Oscar, and Kristen Sneddon are going to vote in favor of a right to return ordinance. And you've got Jordan and Friedman. I mean, Friedman at this meeting started giving a history lesson about zoning laws and the gold rush. And it was like, Eric, you just got a bunch of tenants in the room who just want you to pass this. It's a very simple political calculation. Even if you
Full of the
disagree.
mob, is that it, Josh?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but if it's a mob, but I will say that if you're on the losing side, you know it's going to happen that way. It's so much smarter as a politician to try to get the most you can within that and not look like you're a mean person. And that's how they're coming
I
across.
always appreciate Eric's history lessons, and I thought Sneddon was out of line, making him shut up. I don't.
Well, Jordan did too, because he called her on it and said, "Oh, it's okay for you to say that, but he can't say
Yeah,
that."
exactly.
No, I mean, Eric has a tendency to filibuster even when he's asking you what time it is. And so he was just going on, and he went on and on and on and on and on. And he was making a lot of interesting points, but they really didn't go to the legislation on the table as pointedly, as sharply as they could or should have. And I think they all have interesting questions, and I think they feel stampeded and steamrolled, and they don't like it. And that it doesn't matter what they say, because the other side has the 4 votes, and they're not going to get the time of day. So you see this dynamic where they want to be heard, and the other side is like, we got the votes. Why are you still talking?
Yeah. Why did Oscar abstain on the milpas trees? That one.
What is this abstention business? I just don't feel like saying no. I don't want to take.
Why? I mean, what was that about?
Well, the truth of the matter is he went to the bathroom, and if you miss any part of the appeal,
That makes sense.
the city attorney
All
says
right.
you can't vote on it.
Okay.
And, he said that. He said it on the record. It's not like I'm being rude here. He said it.
Well,
So he had to offer a reason, and that's why he had to abstain.
all right. Well, you guys, I gotta go. I'll see
All
you.
right, man. Why didn't you put that in your story?
I said he had to leave for a personal moment,
Nick forgot to turn his camera off. Nice.
a private moment or private, something
You're
like
gonna look at my wall.
Oh, there we go. It's kind of very and Warholian
You
there.
know, I think it stands in stark contrast to all your bow background, except for Callie. I like the poltergeist that you have.
Well, I'll tell you this, that quadrant is making a lot more sense than it was a couple of minutes ago. I'll tell you.
I'll see you guys.
All right, Callie, what are you working on?
Right now I've today's my fun story day. So I got to go on like a boat with the Maritime Museum yesterday, and they do this little class where like they take the kids out to the like kids from different schools out to the channel and do like trawl fishing or whatever, and show them like crabs and let them look at like plankton under a microscope. And I also got to do sailing lessons recently, so I have to write that up too.
Wow. You get
Yeah.
to do a lot of fun stories, actually.
I know, I'm pretty lucky in that sense.
Um, are you going to do anything on UCSB, the threat of that Trump's made of to pull a bunch of funding for them over all the anti-Semitism stuff that we talked about last spring that was going on, or alleged anti-Semitism?
I saw that. And I think it's been Margot who's mostly been
Oh, okay.
on that pulse. But I might. I mean, I saw the
I
lawsuits.
mean, that's could have a huge impact about research and the research that, we gets channeled into our local tech industry particularly. And it's just, I'm glad I'm old.
A lot of
Who you got on the podcast?
Well, I have a Josh podcast rant about the school board that will be published soon. But
Oh,
I also have Gabe Escobedo, chair of the board, and I'm going to drill down with all the questions.
oh
I
my,
feel so sorry for Gabe because you mentioned it, or Nick did, but I mean, he's so anguished. Like
tell
you,
him I call him the Chuck Schumer of the school board.
he really cares, but it's wearing on him, this whole
Well,
situation.
it's just, it's interesting because he came, he was like this, progressive left kind of red hot guy, and he's more and more, he becomes sort of institutionalist process. We got to dot the I's and cross the T's kind of person, which is what happens, I guess, to a lot of people. But it's an interesting change.
Well, I'm going to ask him about that right wing conservative group that have been, singling him out. They didn't show up at this week's board meeting,
What have
but
they been doing?
they've been, calling for the district to end all the DEI programs. And, Gabe 2 weeks ago shut him down and he took a stand in support of DEI and he said, I'm not going to listen to this. So he's been the target of it on the far right. And then he's getting criticized from people he mostly agrees with, in the art stuff. But, he's in a position where he can't do exactly what they say or he's not choosing to. But
So what form are the attacks? Was it just public comment
they
or?
went during were you there, Callie? I was not there, but what
I wasn't there, but he told me about it a little bit.
they went in public comment and basically, accused the district of being racist because they allow DEI stuff. Like they're totally flipping the script and not understanding racism at all. And
They are understanding it. It's, they're losing white supremacy and they don't like it.
exactly. And then they're passing around a cut up video of the meeting with Gabe, kind of making him look bad. And, Gabe being Mexican American, chair of the board,
Is this the
not,
SB current crowd?
yeah, Fankner and others. So he's under that kind of pressure, and that people understand that just eats at your soul, like that, like all the politics. But when you're like discriminated against based off your like, it's horrific. It's horrible. It makes you feel so bad, and so you can either like cry or you can fight back, and you can see all of that on his face. And most of the kids in San Barbara Unified are Mexican American and Hispanic, and so he carries that weight on his shoulders. So he's under a lot of stress. And these meetings, I know, Kelly, you can see it too. It's like this poor guy, he's trying, you know.
No,
I
I mean,
mean,
it's
I
just,
thought
I'm
I
sorry.
thought he did a great job last meeting, kind of moderating and saying, for the most part, pretty level-headed and rational. Yeah, I thought he did a great job. I thought he was like very, I don't know, he was very like in the middle, I guess. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm probably not the right messenger for this, but what these people are trying to do is to a set of conditions so that anyone other than a white male gets a position, then it's DEI and it's reverse discrimination and it's all this other. And you look at this collection of knuckleheads that he's got in the government. Pete Hegseth, is a weekend talk show host drunk. Oh, well, that's not DEI. No, because he's a white male. That's okay. Bobby Kennedy, who's a brainworm knucklehead, Nepo baby burnout. Oh, that's not DEI because he's a white male. And it's just the most outrageous thing. And it's so upsetting to me, just as someone who has been involved in politics at all different levels for 50 years, and to see what they're trying to do, which is to repeal the 20th century, not to mention the 21st. And so I rescind my comments about Gabe being the Chuck Schumer.
Well, people don't understand DEI. Like I've never understood DEI to mean taking someone less qualified and putting them in a position that they don't deserve. I've always understood it as finding somebody as qualified who has not been allowed to participate in the normal system to get hired and giving them an opportunity to compete with these others. And you will find that when they are allowed an equal opportunity to compete through enhanced recruitment efforts, they absolutely deserve the job, and more so because experiences matter. It's like that X factor that allow you to be a better leader. But this idea that DEI is unqualified is so wrong. I mean, we don't all job hiring. I mean, it's discriminatory in its process. So you've got to go out and find qualified people and include them in the pool. And when you do that, yes, you get diversity, but that's a good thing.
Yeah. No, it's the E in the DEI that I think is the sore point as an intellectual matter. And
Mhm.
we talked a lot about this during the George Floyd protests and after. There's a difference between equality and equity. And equality is equality of opportunity. And I think that's what you're talking about, Josh. And I think that's what most people mean they talk. But, I think there were some radical kind of anti-racist types or equity that you had to have and said that, and until there was absolute proportional mathematical equality, then, there was racism going on. So I think that's where the problem started. I think that's where people talk past each other, to the extent they talk with each other at all. So, all right. Well, I'm glad we had this talk. I feel much better about the state of the world. Callie Fausey, thank you so much. Josh Molina, thank you so much. Nick's blank wall, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks. We'll talk to you next time on Newsmakers.